Marcus, again, you're on the right path. You're going the right direction. You're starting to expose this, but you need to expose the guys above you, McGuire, the other guys that basically push you up to do this, because now you're not only known as a coward who ran away, but now you're also a liar on top of it, and you just keep on continually to tarnish the SEAL name. And it, let us know who did it to you, who forced you above you to make these decisions. It's hard to walk away from $4 million. I get it. I don't know if I would do something different. But now that the cat's out of the bag, it's time to come clean with everything.
I'm Seth Hatena, a veteran journalist covering military and national security affairs. And this is the After Action Report. Welcome back to the After Action Report. Eric Deming is back again. He's a retired Navy SEAL who spent 19 years in the teams and 27 years in the Navy. He was a graduate of BUD/S Class 215 and served with SEAL Teams 2, 4, and 10 and Special Activities Unit 2 and Group 2. He's done personal security for President George W. Bush while he was in the teams and deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times. He has a host of decorations and awards, including 2 Bronze Stars. Eric, thank you for your service, and thanks again for joining me.
Thank you, Seth, for allowing me to come back onto your platform.
So, Eric, we've had a lot of great feedback from our last podcast, which was about the disastrous 2002 SEAL Team 6 mission on a 10,000-foot peak in Afghanistan that became known as Roberts Ridge. So thanks for coming back again.
Yeah. Actually, Seth, I've had a lot of great feedback coming from back then. I've had generational SEALs reaching out to me, appreciating, what I'm doing, and say, hey, really appreciate getting the truth out there and exposing this. It's been, something that's been bothering them for a long period of time. And it's nice to get those, not only the older SEALs and the mid-level, SEALs, or the ones that when I was active duty, but even some of the newer ones. And so it's great to that people are reaching out, and I encourage people to keep reaching out who have more amplifying information, or to correct me if they think I got something wrong, which, luckily so far, the information has been vetted pretty well, and I haven't had anybody come back at me and say I got something wrong yet. So that's been great.
I wanted to have you back to talk about another mission that happened 3 years later that has some eerie echoes of what happened on Roberts Ridge. That's Operation Red Wings, which is better known to people by the story and the book Lone Survivor by Marcus Luttrell, former SEAL. In that mission, 11 SEALs and 8 Army aviators died on another mountain in Afghanistan, and which at the time was the single largest loss of life, for naval special warfare since World War II. Eric, how is Lone Survivor viewed in the SEAL teams?
Most of us knew right from the get-go. The first thing we saw a trident on a book, we're like, who the hell thinks they can just write a book and put a trident on it? And then, so we're a little bit angry about that. And then we realized what the story was about. We started reading it, and just like, there's not very few accurate things in that book. And so it's, within my community, it's a book of bullshit and lies.
So there are a lot of parallels here between Roberts Ridge and Lone Survivor. A helicopter flies a small SEAL recon team to a mountaintop in Afghanistan where they're ambushed. Another helicopter flies in to rescue them and is shot down, and many more people are killed, and a Medal of Honor gets awarded in the aftermath. We talked last time about how in the teams and in the military in general, it's standard practice to acknowledge mistakes so you can learn from them and save lives in the future. Do you think the failure to learn from the mistakes on Roberts Ridge led to the fiasco of Lone Survivor?
Definitely contributed to it. And so definitely, and it also gave guys knowing that they could cover things up and hide things, because the leadership had done it, prior to them. So how could that leadership hold them accountable? And some of them were the same players. Tim Szymanski's in this thing again. that name keeps coming up to a lot of different things.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think most people are generally familiar with Lone Survivor and Marcus Luttrell, so I don't think we need to go into exhaustive detail here. But for those who aren't, quick summary: Marcus is the only surviving member of a group of 4 frogmen who were ambushed in 2005 in the mountains of Afghanistan. Eric, when you get together with your SEAL buddies, what do people say about Marcus?
Lone runner. They don't put him in the light, that in a positive way. It's pretty negative, and it's the lies that he's continued to say that causes all these other guys that were there to have these other victims, the Gold Star family members, the SEALs that were there that know the true story, and so it puts them in an awkward position to have to try to defend the truth and or lie with Marcus.
Okay, so there's a famous story from when Marcus went through BUD/S. Marcus was apparently having a real hard time making it through the training, and many people do. It's one of the hardest forms of training in the world. But Marcus did make it through with some help. Can you walk us through that story?
Yeah, his twin brother filled in for him for about 4 days, and if you get that much time as a breakout at BUD/S, you have an overwhelming unfair advantage of getting through. There's guys that quit going through whatever evolution, and then an hour later they wish they could take it back. So if they were able to have 4 days off, or just say put their hands up and quit for a period of time, and gain their composure, they would have probably been more successful, more guys getting through BUD/S. That's what BUD/S is all about, seeing who's going to not test himself and who's going to put up their hand and quit. And Marcus, by allowing his twin brother, to take his place for 4 days, he put up his hand and quit, and he should never have been able to graduate.
Right.
Greatest BUD/S story? Yeah. It's probably when Morgan and I switched.
Oh my God.
I didn't think you were going to
tell this story, but I want to hear it from you.
So there's a saying in BUD/S, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, right? Is switching with your twin brother, is that the kind of thing that people are talking about? Is that what instructors want to see?
Yeah, that's a saying within the teams. It's meant to encourage people to think outside the box, but not to actual cheat to where you got your twin brother filling in for you, or somebody else is taking over your responsibilities to do the job. Or it doesn't mean that you're doing steroids to get through the program and you're cheating that way. It's more just to kind of think of creative thinking. But the way that Marcus, or to have his brother fill in, he obviously didn't test himself. He obviously quit when he had his brother fill in for that period of time. And it's if those BUD/S instructors had to do again, I bet they wouldn't let him pass.
Okay, so senior commanders eventually did figure out what the Luttrell brothers had pulled off here, but they let Marcus through anyway, at least as far as the story he tells. Why didn't they fail him and make him try again?
I think they were, the BUD/S instructors are really good at catching guys trying to do certain things to get through different evolutions. So that's part of the game. And I think they were surprised. They didn't think a twin brother would be able to come in and look and understand to do the role. So they got duped, and so they just wanted it to go away. And I bet you if those BUD/S instructors right now, or if you said, hey, if you had the choice again, and that, what he did on the battlefield, he ran with all his ammo, would you allow him to get through BUD/S again? And I bet, they would not allow him to get through BUD/S.
Okay. So Marcus does get into the teams, and he's with SDV-1, and that unit is training with SEAL Team 10 for deployment to go to Afghanistan. And there's a pre-deployment workup known as, and it culminates in something called a final training exercise, an FTX. Do you know what happened at the FTX with Marcus?
Yeah, so what I found out later on is more people are talking to me, giving me more information that they had failed their FTX exercise at least one time. And usually, if you fail it once, you got to redo it. I think they failed it twice, and I think at that point, we were needed in country. We needed all the SEALs we could possibly get. So they were just like, man, do we send these guys or not? They were really, there was people saying no. And it was, honestly, the senior enlisted was saying no, they're not ready. And some of the officers were saying, the other way. And so they end up deploying, probably not trained up well enough to make that deployment.
Right.
And it kind of shows in their, how they operated.
Right. And so failing an FTX is a red flag, right?
It's huge. Not very few, because you've already done a year to a year and a half workup of all these different training blocks just to get to this one training exercise, this final FTX exercise. And so it's very seldom does anybody fail it. Very seldom. I don't even think I count more than 3 times that I know of. Wow. Really only maybe 2.
Wow. Okay, so Marcus and SEAL Team 10 does deploy to Afghanistan. What did you hear? What was Marcus like on deployment?
So the guys that were in so he joins up with SEAL Team 10, which the SEAL Team 10 guys and SEAL Team 4 were doing a dual workup at the time. So I knew a lot of those guys, and I talked to them afterwards. And what they said was that Marcus, first thing they were surprised at the SDV team. This group of guys that came from SDV, their land warfare skills just weren't really up to speed. They didn't know how to prep grenades correctly. But one of the biggest things that they had a heartbreak with Marcus was that he was too worried about chasing ass down at the on-base clinic. The nurses, where the girls were at down there. So he would find reasons, because he was a combat medic. He'd find reasons to go down there, and he was focused more on that than actually learning his job as a SEAL. And that pissed off a lot of those guys within SEAL Team 10.
Right. So I should have asked this earlier, but can you kind of explain how you know all this? You were serving at the time, and you were kind of around when all this was going on, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I was doing my platoon chief at SEAL Team 4, and that's kind of your pinnacle as a senior enlisted leader. It's one of the top jobs. It's the sweet spot because you get to be with the guys out on combat operations, and you're dictating the training that they went through. You're kind of in control of a lot of different things. And so it's a great time. So I was doing that. And at the time, we didn't have enough bodies to fill all the commitments into Afghanistan or Iraq. And so SEAL Team 10 and SEAL Team 4 were going to join together and deploy into both those AOs. And they didn't want to make it that one team took Iraq, which was everybody wanted to get into Iraq at the time because Afghanistan there wasn't as much direct action missions kind of going on over there. But in Iraq, there was a lot more going on. So at that time, we were working up together. So I knew a lot of those guys from SEAL Team 10. I knew a lot of guys that were on the helicopter that got shot down with Red Wings. I know a lot of guys that were in the other helicopter. I know a lot of the guys that were supporting, at the top, doing that. So, and then, I'm at after that deployment, I come back, I'm at close quarters defense. And my job was to set up scenarios and training that mimic what you would be going through in combat when you go down range. So we had all the after action reports. We had all the guys telling us what they ran into, situations like that. So they wanted to incorporate anything that went wrong on any mission was being disseminated to us so that we can basically put it into the training to make sure that our guys were prepared if they hit that situation ever again.
Got it. So a lot of the people who are serving with Marcus, and you have a future assignment that makes you privy to all the mistakes that are being made so you can correct them and save lives, but it also makes you aware of the failures that are happening, specifically with Operation Red Wings here. So that brings us to Lone Survivor, Operation Red Wings. Something that doesn't get mentioned in Marcus's book is that the whole mission was a Marine operation that the SEALs commandeered. The original plan was for a Marine recon team to to scout this wannabe warlord's hideout on a mountaintop in Afghanistan called Sautalo Sar. And the second phase of the operation called for a larger Marine force to arrive by helicopters flying at night. The SEALs changed that plan and made it far riskier, right?
They pretty much, we stole it from the Marines because the Marines needed to use our helicopters and they didn't have access to them. So we just like, hey, the only way that this was going to happen is we're going to insert some of our guys as an RNS, trying to get our guys into the fight. And so out of arrogance and not really knowing the terrain, they forced themselves in there and just, trying to make a name and not doing their due diligence on trying to make sure the mission was, planned out correctly.
So, in our first podcast, we talked about Roberts Ridge, that the SEAL commanders were eager to get up there because they thought Osama bin Laden might be up there. Do you know why the SEALs were so eager to get to this mountain 3 years later?
They said it was a higher level guy. And, as far as Marcus makes it look like we're going after Osama bin Laden's, next of kin, but it was a pretty low level guy. It's just that the guys were sitting there and they're looking to get employed and they just wanted to get into the fight. And so they didn't do the job planning it out as correctly as they should have. Right. Really comes down to it.
Okay.
Arrogance is, basically taking it from the Marines who had a better plan, in my opinion.
Right. And I think the Marine plan was originally that they were going to hike up to the top of the mountain. And the SEALs decided to fly to the top of the mountain. Can you kind of touch on this again? This is called landing on the X, right?
Well, so when you do hostage rescue, you land right as close to make entry into the building as fast as possible. Element of surprise, overwhelming with fire superiority and and dominance. When you're doing an RNS mission, you don't want anybody to know you're there, so you do a whole bunch of false insertions and you hump a good distance to get to where you're going to be observed. And this is coming from Gulab and other guys that were in that village. Gulab is the Afghan that saves Marcus. And they heard the helicopter come in. They heard where it sat down at. The Taliban knew it was in the area. So as soon as, daylight broke the next day, the Taliban were up there starting to hunt down, trying to figure out if there was somebody up there because they heard the helicopter kind of, in certain areas. And so they were starting to investigate. And that's where, so what happens for Marcus and those guys is they insert close, to the, closer than they probably should have because the village knew that they were there. The fast rope, because it was steep terrain, they fast rope down. They don't actually land the helicopter. They fast rope down. And in fast roping in Afghanistan, and sometimes because we got different lengths of fast ropes, and in Afghanistan, we had to use some of our longest ropes, which means you are fast roping up to 120 feet, sliding down with just your gloves. And where they were inserting at, there was trees around. So the air crewmen thought that the rope had gotten tangled after the guys were off of it. And instead of pulling that fast rope back up, which is, it's a hard job to do, he just cut it loose and dropped it onto the ground. So that left the problem for a four-man team that they have to, cache this thing, hide it, do what they can do. But we also wear our different boots. We're not running around in flip-flops. So it was easy for the Taliban to kind of track them because they were just following their footprints. And that kind of comes out from Gulab and the Afghans that told me the story later on.
Right.
How they were tracked.
There's a famous scene in the book I want to ask you about. Marcus says his team is compromised by 3 unarmed goat herders, one of whom was a teenage boy. And Marcus says he and his teammates, they had to make a decision whether to kill all these goat herders and possibly face war crime charges or to let them go. And in the end, the team decided to let them go, something that Marcus regrets to this day. What's your view on this? Was that the only options they had, killing the goat herders or letting them go?
Negative. So the SOPs are for us is that Well, first thing, if you're in an RNS situation and you have goat herders come by, you like, okay, did we actually get compromised? Did they see us? If they saw you, then you actually have to apprehend them and hold them. And when you hold them, you call back to headquarters, say, hey, we got compromised. We got 3 goat herders here. We're going to need an extract, and we're going to move to this position. When can we expect an extract? And you either sit there and wait for the extract to kind of happen. If it's only a couple 100 yards away, they're going to pick you up. You sit there and hold those guys. You flex cuff them, and you tie them to a tree or do whatever you're going to do, and you hold them there until your extract platform shows up. And then once that extract platform shows up, you can cut them loose, but most of the time they get themselves loose from that type of stuff. You just get on the helicopter and you get out of there. So that's our SOPs as far as it's just like you can't innocently kill unarmed civilians just because you get compromised. That's never a plan. And that just shows that his training wasn't, up to speed, or the other side of it is, the whole book is fiction. So it's, it's hard to know what the truth is there, but that's our SOPs within the teams.
Right. And this idea that you're just going to gun down a bunch of goat herders, unarmed goat herders. I mean, that is not, that is tarnishing the SEAL name, right? SEALs are professional warriors.
It's not who we are. It's a war crime. It's not who we are as Americans. It's not who we are as just individual people that are, doing the right thing. And, and Marcus is one of his podcasts. He says, he's got the 12-year-old kid. He was just like, you can't turn your back on those and they'll cut your head off and play soccer with it. I've seen it happen. I'm just like, bullshit. You've seen, kids playing soccer with somebody's head.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I'd love to hear that story.
So not long after they let the goat herders go, Luttrell and his team are compromised. And he wrote in his book that he faced up to 200 men on that day in Afghanistan. Is that what happened?
No, there was, from my assessment, only 7 to 8 people. In the official reports, as far as, and when I say official, a lot of this is going off of Marcus's accounts, is 30 to 40 Taliban. So the book is, pretty far off from accurate.
Okay. So, but things have gone pretty wrong if a 4-man SEAL team is compromised by as few as 7 to 8 men, right?
Yeah. So what happened? They got it wasn't like they were already compromised by the goat herders. From Gulab and the Taliban's perspective, they saw that the goat herders had come up. The Taliban were already tracking them. They were already following their footprints. And when the goat herders left and got far enough away, that's when the Taliban attacked, because they had already been watching them. They knew where they were at. And that's coming from the Afghan side telling the story. So it wasn't that there was nothing about the goat herders that got them compromised by the Taliban. The goat herders had nothing, say in it.
Gotcha. So it was kind of wrong from the beginning, basically. That their bad their insertion that alerted everybody. That's the problem here, not the goat herders.
Yeah, for sure. And Marcus, Gulab, there's a language barrier and everything, but Gulab explains a lot of this to him after the fact. Marcus might not have known it at the time. He might have thought that's who, that they told the Taliban, and the Taliban showed up an hour later. The Taliban were just waiting for the goat herders to get out of the way so they could ambush them.
Okay. So Marcus's teammates that day, Matt Axelson, Lieutenant Mike Murphy, and Danny Dietz, they were all killed. Did you know them?
Yeah, I did know them. We were doing the workup. Well, no real personal stories. We were just crossing paths because they were kind of over at, were about to deploy at the same time. So nothing stateside that stands out, other than just, us kind of going through some training blocks, around the same time. In
Lone Survivor, Luttrell lays out that there's a pretty ferocious firefight that goes on. They're surrounded by however many men are there, but they're surrounded, kind of pinned down. They're having trouble communicating with the operations center, the TOC back in Afghanistan. And Mike Murphy, according to Luttrell, makes the decision to step out into a clearing and call for help on a satellite phone. Is that what happened, or what's your understanding what went on that day?
So Danny Dietz was making good communications up until the point where they start moving somewhat, and they didn't at the talk. The first call that kind of comes into them where they start getting spun up, it comes from a sat phone call, and another call coming from stateside saying, "Hey, you got guys and you got a tick going on, troops in contact," and that's when they start getting spun up because for some reason the communications weren't happening at the talk correctly. And what I heard, the radio wasn't being manned properly at the talk. Had nothing to do with what Danny Dietz was doing on the battlefield. And that's why Danny or Murph, one of the two, and I'm going to lean more towards Danny making that sat phone call more than Murph does, because the people that I know said it sounded more like it was Danny making that call in extremis.
Okay, so they're pinned down. Murphy or Dietz makes that phone call, and this is the point where Marcus loses contact with the rest of his team. He's blasted off the side of a mountain. But that call does go through. That call is received, and a team comes out on another helicopter to try to rescue Marcus and his teammates. What happened next?
So now the guys at the talk are somewhat embarrassed that they've missed this and that their guys are in trouble. And now it's gone outside their command as far as it went all the way stateside and came back to them because they had to use a satellite phone. So a lot of people now are alerted to it. But now they're trying to okay, how do we get the fastest guys and try to hide our mistakes? So what they should have done, which is always standing by whenever you got troops out in the field, is that you got a QRF that is basically can launch within 15 to 30 minutes and be close to your position to kind of come help you. We had Rangers and we had Marines standing by in case of something like this happened. And instead of launching them, they decide to throw as many guys as they can onto two Chinooks and to land close to where they think they're going to be at, and to see if they can get in there to help them troops in contact, and so they don't follow what the CONOP had set up. They tried to, do something different. And I can't fault the guys that jumped on that helicopter that, wanted to save their buddies. They're just, they want to get out there and do everything they can. But there should have been some close-in air support whenever you got, big, slower moving helicopters. You usually have a couple of Apaches, A-10s or something like that are around them to make sure they're protected. And because that doesn't happen, they end up, Red Wings ends up getting shot down.
Right. And, how did they get shot down? There's some dispute about this. What's your understanding of what happened?
Yeah. So like I said, I knew the guys that were on both those helicopters. The one helicopter that didn't get shot down was watching the other guys who were getting ready to get inserted. So they were almost at a hover. And that's when an SA-7, comes. The second helicopter flies to a smoke trail of the SA-7, which went straight into the helicopter that got shot down. And they watched it hit the helicopter. They watched it lurch, roughly 45 degrees. Some of the people started getting dumped out the back. The whole thing kind of goes down, and then they see the big explosion. And so they saw exactly what hit it. And so they make maneuvers because they don't know if there's another one. But they end up setting down on a mountaintop not too far away from there to say, all right, now we got, not only are we missing the SDV team guys, Marcus and the four guys there, and we got a shot down helicopter, but there might be people alive, and they're going to try to patrol down to that and see if they can help out.
Right.
As they get a plan together, they end up they get forced to come back to base.
Got it. Okay, so it's commonly been reported that an RPG shot down that helicopter. Why is it significant that it was shot down by an SA-7?
Well, because now it's well documented. So when those guys come back off that second helicopter, they're all like, holy crap, what was that took it down? So they're all pissed. They're still trying to get out to help Marcus and and try to get out and see if there's any survivors. So they're trying to understand what the real threat is out there. So they go through all the intel and they they're like, that's it. They finally find it. Exactly the smoke trail. This is what it looked like. This is it tracked just like that thing did. It turned. It did all this stuff that to everybody that was there on in the other helicopter. ID'd it. Yeah, it must have been an SA-7. Then a high-ranking guy comes in, and they're explaining to him what happened. He goes like, "No, that's not what happened. It was a lucky shot with an RPG. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Like, "No, sir." They're trying to correct him. They think he just misunderstood. They try to like, "No, you need to understand me. It is a lucky shot with an RPG," and a lot of our guys had problems with that. And then a lot of guys had to sign things to say that, they would never, talk about it. But a lot of them, it bothered them because that turned into extortion 17 later on. So because they were told to shut up about this and say it was not, it was not an SA-7, because if it was an SA-7, where did that SA-7 come from? Was it U.S. made or was it a Chinese knockoff? And so if Chinese are involved with it, supplying stuff, these are heat-seeking type missiles, and the aircraft need to know if this is a threat so that they can do things to mitigate it. They can do more flying at night. They can do stuff to make sure that if these are in that area, and we can do things to try to recover them or try to, make them not effective. And so by not reporting it correctly, they endangered, so I don't know how many helicopters end up getting shot down, in Afghanistan after this point, but that information should have been disseminated out to everybody that this was what took it down. And for some reason, the SEALs were told to lie about it.
Wow. Okay. So, Eric, I wanted to take a moment to honor the people who did die that day. It said that people die twice. The first time is their physical death, and the second time is the last time someone says their name. So with your permission, I'd like to read the names of the people who did die during Operation Red Wings.
I appreciate you doing it, Seth. It's so important for the families, these Gold Star families who lost their son, their brother, their husbands, and to know that these guys are being honored, and they should be. They met the call for the United States, defending the Constitution and meeting the call, and they died, warriors.
All right.
Thank you for doing it.
Sure. So the names of the men who lost their lives during Operation Red Wings are Matthew Axelson, Navy SEAL, Danny Dietz, Navy SEAL, Jacques Fontaine, I think he's a Navy SEAL also, Seamus Guar,
Doc Fontaine,
Staff Sergeant with the U.S. Army, Corey Goodnature, Chief Warrant Officer with the U.S. Army, Daniel Healy, Second Chief Petty Officer, Navy SEAL.
Senior Chief,
Senior Chief. Kip A. Jacoby, Sergeant with the U.S. Army. Eric Christensen, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy SEAL. Jeffrey Lucas, Petty Officer, First Class Navy SEAL. Michael McGreevy, Lieutenant, U.S. Navy SEAL. Marcus Morales, Sergeant First Class, U.S. Army. Michael Murphy, Lieutenant, U.S. Navy SEAL. Shane Patton, Petty Officer, Second Class, U.S. Navy SEAL. James Ponder, Master Sergeant, U.S. Army. Stephen Reich, Major, U.S. Army. Michael Russell, Sergeant First Class, U.S. Army. Chris Schirkenbach, Chief Warrant Officer, U.S. Army. James Suh, Petty Officer, U.S. Navy SEAL. And Jeffrey S. Taylor, Petty Officer, U.S. Navy SEAL.
Thank you for doing that, Seth.
Yep. Back to Marcus. He gets rescued by an Afghan timber worker named Mohammed Gulab, who hides him from the gunmen who are looking for him. Gulab is kind of an unsung hero here, isn't he?
Oh, he's the only reason that Marcus is still alive, and he defended Marcus. And it's a shame that Marcus hasn't done more to help him out and his family, because his nephew ends up dying. And there's multiple attacks on his life that he barely misses. Him and his wife were fighting for their lives over there, and their families are finally come to the United States, but it takes a while.
Yeah. So Gulab told journalist Ross Schneiderman that Luttrell still had 11 magazines of ammunition when he found him, and they appeared to be full. What does that say about Marcus?
And I heard that multiple different ways too. Not only through that, but as far as it just shows that, and there's a pred feed that I was told about that would be so embarrassing to us that we don't want to expose it because it would show us that we had a guy leave guys behind again, just like Slab did with John Chapman. That another time that we had SEALs leave a man behind, and for him to have all his ammo it's heartbreaking because that just, how can you? I mean, the one thing that we do a lot is shoot, and for him to even have any mags full was surprising to me.
Yeah. So that's another parallel with Roberts Ridge there, the pred feed. But just to be clear, we've never seen this pred feed. Have you ever seen it? How do you know about it? The pred feed from Lone Survivor.
I was told from guys that talked to a high-ranking NSW guy who saw the video and said it would be too embarrassing for us to let that be seen, and that that at the time, this is back then, that we don't want that to come out. And I don't know what's happened to it, but I personally haven't seen it yet. I've been told about it by multiple different people.
All right. So Army Rangers find Marcus 4 days after the firefight. And one of their first questions for him is, where are your teammates? Where did you last see them? And Nicholas Moore is one of the Rangers who found Marcus. Nicholas has written a book, and in there he says that Luttrell could not recall, quote, a single terrain feature or identifying landscape that could have helped track down his comrades. We struggled to understand how he didn't even know the general area of his patrol, close quote. Can you kind of explain that for the non-military folks in the audience here? That's a pretty glaring training failure, right?
Yeah, for sure. As far as as you're even planning the operation, your job is to look at all the imagery of where you're going to go and trying to figure out, okay, this is the best place to set up a OP, an observation post. And so you do a great map study because you know how you're going to patrol there. That's going to be not seen. And so it's for him not to know where his guys were at after the firefight it's another, you weren't paying attention during training and you were running the whole time. And so you just got lost. And
Right.
because you didn't stop to see where in the hell they were at, he was just embarrassed.
Wow. So according to Nicholas Moore, when the Rangers find Luttrell, he tells them that his teammates are all dead, somewhere on the mountain. He's not sure where. But without any they don't have any landmarks to guide them. So the 75th Ranger Regiment is spending 2 weeks, clambering up and down the steep slopes of this mountain where the gunfight had taken place, searching for Marcus's 3 teammates. And the reason why I wanted to ask you about this is because Matthew Axelson's body isn't found for 2 weeks after the gunfight. Do you think that if Luttrell had been able to identify landmarks and been able to guide the Rangers to where his teammates were, do you think that Matthew Axelson could have been saved?
100%. It's more than that. If Marcus says that they're all, when he gets questioned, where's all your guys at? And he says they're all dead. So that turned that mission from a rescue mission into a recovery mission. We're going to be a little bit more slow and methodical because we've been risking guys' lives trying to save lives. And now we're not going to risk any more lives because we're all dead already. And so because of that, and Marcus not being able to pinpoint where they were at, they start scouring up and down the mountain close to where the village is. Well, it just happened that Axelson was still alive. He was moving to what we call a SARDOT, a recovery. If all the shit hits the fan and you don't have any communication, this is where you go to and you put out this type of signal and we're going to pick you up. Well, it took the SEAL Team 10 guys coming all the way from Germany to come in and start helping, trying to find where, because they can't find Axelson for, like you said, I think it was 8 to 10 days, somewhere right in there. And I know the guys that were on that platoon that went up, and found Axelson, and they found him close to where he was supposed to be. And it looked like at that point, the guys had told me, he said, Eric, it looked like he was maybe dead a day. He goes, two days max. It was so hot and he wasn't really bloated yet. And just like, so we know what we seen death and we know what, what it looks like after a period of time. And so I trust their assessment that he was only dead for maybe a day, 2 days max. And that was that. I think that was 10 days after they got the initial firefight. But that's just something we should have owned and that he should have owned and not tried to cover up and write this false book about it.
Right. Wow. So Lieutenant Mike Murphy is posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. That's the first for action in Afghanistan. And I want to say no one doubts Murphy was a hero, but the award is based on the account of one man, Marcus Luttrell, the only survivor of this mission. So this becomes important later on because there's no one left to contradict Marcus's account, right?
That's a fact. And now that he's even admitted himself, and we all knew it within the teams that he wasn't putting out 100% accurate information. And so it clouds that award. But I know Murph was a solid guy. He died on that mountain trying to save, everybody that was under his command. So yeah, he was just an honorable guy.
All right. So Marcus claimed he was shot 11 times. He broke his back and pelvis. He tore his shoulder, destroyed his knees, suffered severe facial damage, and bit his tongue in half. Is that the true story?
No, he wasn't that banged up when we got him out. And even in the picture that Gulab took when he was in the village, that's on Ross Schneiderman's article that he wrote, that Gulab gave him the picture for, shows that Marcus isn't all beat up the way he says. And Gulab counters it too. He said, no, he wasn't that banged up. And then you can talk to the Green Berets and Rangers. Marcus walks himself onto the helicopter when they get the helicopter in to rescue him. He wasn't crawling for 7 miles and drawing a line in the sand and crawling. He wasn't doing all that stuff.
Got it. Okay. All right. So Marcus returns home, or he returns to Germany initially. He returns home, and it's not long before he's at work on a book. Do you know how this book came to be?
Yeah. So according to Marcus, they gave him a ghostwriter. They gave him time off to go talk to, basically spend time with him to help write this book. And the story was so embarrassing to us that they were like, hey, we got to, change the narrative and put out. So they convinced Marcus, it's like, hey, we're going to tell a different story than what actually happened. And Marcus, do you want to be known as the coward who ran away, or do you want to be known as the lone survivor? And so Marcus got $4 million and signed off on the book and has been selling this lie up until I did my first podcast on the Anti-Hero guys, and I exposed some of this, and now he's starting to kind of come clean with some of it because I talked to Marcus directly, and Marcus, again, you're on the right path, you're going the right direction, you're starting to expose this, but you need to expose the guys above you that McGuire, the other guys that basically push you up to do this, because now you're not only known as a coward who ran away, but now you're also a liar on top of it, your credibility, and you just keep on continually to tarnish the SEAL name. And let us know who did it to you, who forced you above you to make these decisions. It's hard to walk away from $4 million. I get it. I don't know if I would do something different. But now that the cat's out of the bag, it's time to come clean with everything.
Wow. So yeah, let's talk about who was above him. So this has never happened before. An active duty SEAL is given permission and encouraged to write a book. It's safe to say that's not going to happen without very senior leadership's approval, right? Who was greenlighting this project?
Yeah, Admiral McGuire was directly in charge, and Marcus even says that he that was his top cover. That was the guy that took him and moved them from different, teams to get them out of country, then to get them back into country as the book is being finished up so it doesn't get leaked out. And and then they get Marcus media training and lawyers to make sure everything's, done correctly. And, but I think it was just the guys in my community that were embarrassed. It's going to hurt the brand, but they also saw an opportunity to make, sell this false story and make some money off of it.
Right. So again, the pattern's starting to repeat itself, same as it did in Roberts Ridge. No one's being held accountable here, right? And instead, a book is being written to tell a different version of events.
Yeah, not only a book was written with a false thing, but false awards were presented. How does Marcus end up with the Navy Cross being presented to him by George Bush in the White House? Because the people between Marcus and George Bush, maybe up at the higher levels, up towards George Bush, they were just believing the SEALs were telling the true story. Because why would a Navy SEAL ever have to lie? And they shouldn't have to lie. Just like you own your mistakes, that's what makes you better. And that's, that gets into some other people later on, extreme, leadership or extreme ownership that don't do that are exact opposite. So the cover up, they think is, that they're going to be successful at covering it up, because at this point, Roberts Ridge was covered up pretty well, even though it happened 4 or 5 years earlier. The real story hasn't even come out what Chapman did. We're starting to hear some of it. So Tim Szymanski, who was the operations officer back at Group 2, when the call comes in from either Danny Dietz or Mike Murphy, he's on the other end of the phone over there like, holy shit, we got guys in trouble. And so he's just like, he knows how to cover something up and hide it. So he probably pushed those guys, hey, you go get our guys yourself. Don't, trying to keep this as low profile so it doesn't embarrass us and hurt the brand. And so that pressure probably came from Tim Szymanski and Joel McGuire, helping Marcus cover it up, after the fact. And then all the guys that have to lie to the Gold Star families when they come back off of it, so that's who I'm talking for, all the victims. And we'll get into that here soon, I guess.
Yeah. No, I wanted to, you brought up the Gold Star families, and that's kind of a good segue here. There's some reporting from Matt Cole in his kind of seminal book about some of the problems in the SEAL community, Code Over Country, that he quotes an officer saying that McGuire said, Admiral Joe McGuire, who's in charge of Naval Special Warfare, he sold the whole book idea to the Naval Special Warfare community by saying it would be insensitive to the families of the dead to kind of go through the, analyze the mistakes and the after action reports that should have been done. Can you kind of address that? Like, is that being insensitive to the families, or do families deserve the truth?
No, the families 100% deserve the truth, and they want to know that their sons didn't die in vain, that there are going to be some corrective measures that happen, or at least some people held accountable. You start holding people accountable, and the people that are making these bad leadership positions or decisions won't make them. They won't send their guys into these ambush situations because it's a chance that they can get court-martialed over it. And if they would have court-martialed Tim Szymanski after Roberts Ridge, a lot of this stuff wouldn't have happened. And that's all the Gold Star families want, is accountability, that their son didn't die in vain, or their husband or their dad. And so they deserve the truth. They deserve nothing but the truth. And that's who I'm talking for. I'm talking for the people that don't have a voice. The people that are doing these podcasts and making millions of dollars off these, these books and these false stories, and telling these, flat out lies, are monetizing money off the blood of my brothers. And now, since those stories were covered up and hid, lessons learned weren't captured, and so Red Wings turns into Extortion 17. And so if we don't make these corrective and hold people accountable, it just keeps happening. And then, so then you end up with other situations that happen, to Navy SEALs down the line. We can talk about all the bad things. There's many different things that happen wrong where our name is not well respected now. And it's all because of these guys have been found out to be liars, and my community allowed it to happen for too long. We should have been addressing this when it happened. We should have owned it from the get-go.
Wow.
We should have done what Jocko says to do, that he's never done.
To own your mistakes, own your failures. Got it. Eric, there's another parallel here with Roberts Ridge. Tim Szymanski, who was the decision maker on that mission, becomes tied to the failures of that mission because he pushed the team to get to the top of the mountain and had owned, if not publicly, at least privately, the failures that happened. The parallel is that Joe McGuire, the decision maker on the lone survivor story, he's also tied to something that happens many, many years earlier when he was a young lieutenant. And he was overseeing a small platoon that had a young officer in there named Ensign Ralph Penny. Can you tell the story of what happened to Ensign Penny?
Yeah, so Ensign Penny was a stellar performer in his Buds class. For some reason, he gets to go to SEAL Team 2. And because he's got such a good reputation, he gets to go pretty quick on a deployment, a training type situation where they're out of this country. The old guys get him so liquored up and that he's not making good decisions, and they decide to take him to a after hours bar, which was mainly gay, and they sold him off to the guys that were in there. He wakes up the next day, finds out that some things happened to him that he's not happy about, and they're using this to, and it's what's sad about it. I think they were doing this to have leverage over him to make sure that hold this officer. You ever say anything about what we're doing, we're going to tell about what happened to you. So he commits suicide. And so he commits suicide because of these bad things that these guys set him up to do. And all those guys should have been court-martialed. They should have been investigated. It should have been a huge deal. But instead, McGuire hides it, and he creates a rift within the teams because that guy was so respected from all the guys in his Buds class. And when they found out what exactly happened, they were pretty pissed off about it. And that's the story perpetuates. And because McGuire, now the people have dirt on McGuire because he covered this up. So now McGuire can't hold anybody accountable because if he does, they're going to say, look what you did, and it didn't happen until Matt Cole's book came out, Code Over Country, that a lot of this got exposed and showing you what kind of, messed up culture sometimes, that we have in, in certain platoons. It's not the norm, and it should have been weeded out and rooted out and made an example of, and that way we wouldn't have future things like this happen. But, instead it gets covered up.
So the playbook is, though, protect your career, protect the SEAL brand, and do what you have to do to make these things go away. And that's what's happening now in Lone Survivor. It's the same playbook, right?
Pretty much the exact same playbook. And, now you got Tim Szymanski, who is the deputies ops over at Group 2 that's involved with it too. And so you got Joel McGuire, who made bad decisions when he was a lieutenant. That's, so he can't hold guys accountable, but now he's advanced further up the chain. Now he's like, well, this is going to hurt my career and it's going to tarnish the SEAL brand to expose this. And so it goes into cover-up mode instead of, corrective actions to make sure this stuff doesn't happen again.
Right. Because by this time, he's Admiral McGuire, and what's just happened in Operation Red Wings is the largest loss of life the SEALs have experienced since World War II, I think. I mean, it's a devastating day. And rather than own it and accept responsibility and demand accountability, the playbook is to hand out medals and create this book. Okay, so in the summer of 2006, Marcus has his book contract, and he leaves a pre-deployment workup to go spend several weeks to work with his co-author, Patrick Robinson. I want to ask you about this from the SEAL side. What does it mean to you? What goes through your head when you hear that a SEAL, someone in your unit, is taking weeks off to go write a book? What does that say about not only that SEAL, but about the priorities of the command?
Yeah, so he goes back into country, back into Iraq this time, and he's in a leadership position. I think he was actually in an LPO position. So now you got a guy who didn't even, failed multiple training exercises when he was at SDV. Now he's kind of in charge of making guys, decisions on the battlefield. He's already been shown to be, a coward and everything. So this is not the person, this person needs a lot of extra training to get him up to speed that we could have confidence in him. And for him to put his priorities on writing a book and for the command to do that, their priorities were just messed up. They weren't, that does nothing to protect the Constitution of the United States or us as, or your brother SEAL to your left or right of you. This is just something that you do to further your own personal benefit.
But it strikes me like, we talked about how he took 4 days off from Buds to rest up and his brother pinch hit for him. Kind of the same thing's happening here, right? He's taken time off of training to write a book. So they were perpetuating training failure after training failure here, right?
For sure. And that's what a lot of this kind of comes down to, is that the training is so important to get right. And when I get done with my platoon chief, I got to go to training command, and that's where I learn a lot of this information because I become a close quarters defense instructor, CQD instructor. Everything I taught the guys was they're getting ready to go down range very soon. If I taught them something that wasn't life-saving, that was wasting their time, they would let me know. They would say, "You fucking wasted my fucking, my week or my 2 weeks, or however long we were going through this block. You wasted my time. I got more important things to do than to spend time, that's not productive training." So for him to miss any training at all, as far as there's multiple guys that have gotten divorces because they're just gone all the time training because it's that important to get right, because your life, your buddy's life depends on it. And if you don't get the training right, you're going to make bad decisions and bad things are going to happen downrange. So you have to get the training right. And that's where we're failing. And that's, if you look at this, whether Roberts Ridge, where they broke a bunch of protocol, on that, then, the training mishaps for the SDV team that, didn't get it in the country, before they went in the country correctly. And now he's getting ready to go out to Iraq for a third time, and he's not even taking the job serious at this point. And he says in his podcast that he was kind of restricted to staying on base, but what kind of leader can you have that's an LPO if he's not going out the door with you why would anybody put him in that position in the first place? They were doing it to give him some clout, give him some type of, recognition that he was more than what he actually was.
So it's like a title or a promotion in name only. He's given a desk job and maybe a fancier title and more pay, but he's not given any more responsibilities.
Yeah, and he even makes some bad decisions on that deployment too, and we'll get, that's another story.
Yeah. Okay. So to come back to Lone Survivor, so the book comes out. We all know it's a smash success, #1 bestseller. 5 days after Marcus leaves the Navy in June 2007, he's on the Today Show with Matt Lauer. The book is shooting up the bestseller charts. It becomes a hit movie with Mark Wahlberg in 2013, and it's made Marcus a pretty wealthy man. Do you have any idea how much Marcus made off of Lone Survivor?
I know off the book deal itself, he got $4 million. I don't know what he got off the movie, and I don't know what he's getting for all his speaking engagements that he does. But that's all stuff that's what, all you investigative reporters that are out there, guys, and gals like you, Seth, if they start following the money within NSW, that will help me clean it up, because once you start understanding where the money that Marcus got, or the money that, as far as what all these different podcasts that are making and all these other book deals, once you start following that money, it's going to expose all the people that are involved with this.
Right.
And I got no issues. First thing, I wish Lone Survivor was a true story, per se. I wish, Roberts Ridge was a true story. I want Navy SEAL heroes out there. I want guys to write books of stuff that they did, as long as it doesn't expose our TTPs, our SOPs, and doesn't give away anything that, that would jeopardize the lives of future team guys.
Right.
I got no issues with that, but I have a huge issue when it's all lies and, and good SEALs died because of your bad actions.
Marcus made a ton of money off this book, but this book is full of lies and half truths and exaggerations, and there are a lot of people who have to live with that story, right?
Yeah, so it's for every Navy SEAL, one of the questions they first get. So, hey, what do you know about the Marcus Luttrell story or the Jocko Willing or Roberts Ridge? Those are the questions that we get asked. Can you give me the inside scoop? And then you're just like, you have to kind of like, oh shit, do I jeopardize my integrity and tell them the lie that, that these other people are saying? And because, or do I tell them, which is going to, make that conversation 10 times longer. So it puts every Navy SEAL in an awkward situation, either to lie, which they know every senior SEAL, anybody that's a E7 and above knows that all these stories are bullshit and fake. Maybe some of the younger guys don't know it, but it's a chance that, all the older ones definitely know. So it puts us in a situation that either we have to lie ourselves or we have to expose a part of my community that didn't stand up to the SEAL ethos that people put us up at. So it puts us in a weird situation.
Right. And the book obviously changed Marcus's life. Did the success of Lone Survivor change the teams? Did it send the wrong message to the teams?
Oh, for sure, because it showed that, we're going to cover and hide things and hide the truth. And that encourages other guys to do the exact same thing, to cover up and hide things. And how can I make a dollar off of this? Because, the real heroes, on that mountain that died, in the helicopter being shot down, and, the 3 guys that died on the mountain, those are the real heroes. And for other people to make money off of that and not tell and honor, the true sacrifice and lie about it. So you got the platoons that were there that know the truth, that have to sign these NDAs saying that they're not going to talk about this. They have to come back and look at these same family members. They have to look at the kids of their somebody they consider a brother. Because I'll tell you right now, some of my teammates, SEAL teammates, are closer to me than my brothers were. And so now you look at their families and you have to like bite your tongue and not, or avoid them. And that makes it awkward too, because you're avoiding them because you don't want to tell them the truth. And so it makes it, this burden put on, instead of the burden being put on the guys who did the bad things, it's put onto the honorable guys that want to do the right thing, but they're forced to tell this lie. And it puts them in this, so they start drinking. They start doing, sleeping something to help them sleep because they're having nightmares about it. And it's bothering them because they lost, some good brothers during this. And it just puts them in a total, they don't know what to do with their lives. The honorable thing that they joined up to be part of is not the honorable thing that they thought it was. And it's not, it can be, it should be if we own it. And our leadership let us down by allowing Marcus and Tim Szymanski and Jocko and all the other ones that are spreading these lies, and not holding them accountable, because that made 2 or 3 other people just like them. And those 2 or other 3 people were going to end up getting other good SEALs killed, where it gets back to that training thing. The guys in the Red Sea, that the 2 SEALs that recently drowned, the training was gun deck. They didn't even do the proper training to go out there. And so those guys drowned because training wasn't done correctly, and they made bad decisions that led to their death. And the Gold Star families need to know it. Those guys drowned right off the bat, but the families were led to believe that there was a chance they might be saved when everybody there knew they drowned right away. And so the Gold Star families aren't getting the true the true story, they know something's not right because all the SEALs that are avoiding them or the SEALs that are telling them the truth, and then you got the SEALs that are lying to them. So they're just like, what the fuck is, excuse for the French, what in the hell is the truth around here? And they just want to know the truth. And it would alleviate a lot of burden, Marcus. It would alleviate a lot of burden if the truth came out fully, because these guys that have been carrying it and not happy to be, had to tell these stories can be honest with these Gold Star families. And those are the real victims. Those are the people I'm standing up for by doing this. That's my only people. What, do you got an axe to grind? No, I love my community. And there's people that are not speaking up for the people that should be spoken up for. The Neil Roberts, the John Chapman, the Danny Dees, the Axelson, the Murph, and then the other guys out on Bruiser that end up dying. As far as you got Mark Lee, you got Ryan Job that dies later when he gets stateside, but got shot in Iraq. And then you got Mikey Mansour that has to jump on a grenade. The only ones that benefit from these lies are the ones, of what actually happened to all these deaths out there, all these guys, these SEALs that died. The only ones that benefit from the lie are the guys that caused it. And those are the ones that are, that are get close to these Gold Star families. And because the Gold Star families just want answers. They want to forgive people. They want to, things to be accurate. And it's so bad that some of our guys lie straight to these Gold Star families' faces. And I'm talking about Mama Lee. And she's been lied to what actually happened to her son for years. And it's sickening to me that somebody can do that to her.
Okay. There's another way the book changed the teams, though. I think there's an officer, Forrest Crowell, I think is his name. And he wrote a kind of famous paper about SEALs Gone Wild, about all the branding and monetizing that was coming out of the SEAL community. And he said it all really started with Lone Survivor, that all these podcasts and movies and people in Congress, that this all started with Lone Survivor. Is that how you see it too?
I would say a lot of it for sure. I think a little bit more started with Roberts Ridge, just because you got some of the key players that start that and start this cultural change. But it definitely kicked it into high gear with Lone Survivor. Because if you just look at Marcus Luttrell, he shouldn't have gotten through BUD/S for one. Then he ends up at the SDV team, and they fail their training exercises as far as before they deploy. So they're not meeting the criteria of a SEAL on the battlefield. Now they get on the battlefield and they fail miserably, as far as because of the training stuff wasn't done correctly. They fail on the battlefield. Now from that, we could have handled that. We could have corrected that training, flaws, or we could have corrected all the Marcus, things that he did wrong. But the problem is that the command got behind selling the false story, and that was Admiral McGuire. Admiral McGuire starts promoting, Marcus Luttrell, and so now everybody knows that Marcus is a coward and didn't do what he should have done on the battlefield. But now they're promoting him, and they give him a Navy Cross. They give it to him at the White House, and so that's all of a sudden, the culture within the SEAL teams is confused. Are we honorable, solid type operators that, own our failures and our mess ups, or are we a bunch of liars that paint a false picture of what actually happened on the battlefield? And because we push that instead, other guys die later on because we don't own it. We don't make any corrective actions to make sure this type of behavior is not only not condoned, but it's also not rewarded, at all either. And that's the problem that we end up with. And that's what changes the culture in the teams.
Eric, it's quite a story, and you've touched on some things. I hope we can get you back, but thanks so much for coming on, and thanks again for your honesty and your courage and speaking out.
Seth, I can't thank you enough. And if you could make sure that my email, because of these podcasts, so many people reach out to me and give me more information and, little bits and pieces that I don't know. So if you got something that you think can contribute to any of these stories to make sure we're getting the full picture, because I'm all about transparency, please reach out to me. It's almost getting to where I can't even focus on, flipping houses because I got so many phone calls kind of coming in. But it's so important for my community to clean this up. And so, and a lot of these calls are coming from my fellow teammates, team guys that are just like, all right, well, the true brotherhood that want to clean this up. So please reach out to me if you think you got anything to contribute. And it doesn't have to be a team guy. It can be support. It can be Army, Navy, it could just whoever you are. If you had a situation that you think that needs to be brought to light, please reach out to me. And as anybody knows, as far as that, I protect my sources very well, and nobody's that's given me any information that's any problems with that. So please allow me to be a voice for you if you need me to be that voice.
Okay, if it's okay with you, I'll put your email in the show notes, and people can reach out to you.
That'd be perfect if you don't mind.
Sure, no problem. All right, Eric, thanks so much, and we hope to have you back.
All right, thank you, Seth, and thanks again for having me on, allowing me to talk about these important topics.
Thank you.